Liverpool, from England's northwest. As Matthew, just want a big shout out to Nuku, the team at Nuku Order for providing the opportunity for this webinar. So a little bit about me. I live in Tawa with my wife and two tamariki. I have been involved at community level as a coach, rugby, football, athletics. Well, not coaching athletics, more just helping to deliver it. Cricket, as well as I've been a committee member and helped support some of those clubs with their decision making around the experiences that our tamariki and rangatahi and wider whānau are having within our community out there in Tawa. So my current role, I started at Sporting Z in August last year when I was brought on as a contractor to run a project creating resources, safeguarding resources for tamariki and rangatahi. As the project sort of progressed, we realised that there's still a bit of work to do in building a robust system for organisations and the adults operating within the space for safeguarding. So we repurposed the project. But during that time that I've been at Sporting Z, there's also been work with sport and recreation with the integrity legislation that got passed a few months back. So the decision was made that I would sort of straddle between the Integrity Transition Program, who are tasked with creating the legislation, operationalising the commission and developing a new sport and rec code of integrity. So I straddle between working at Sporting Z and within the ITP, so the Integrity Transition Program. Prior to Sporting Z and the ITP, I've sort of come via two organisations that I worked for simultaneously. New Zealand Rugby was one, but also a youth and family sort of social work agency, Challenge 2000, who operate in Johnsonville, but work within the Wellington area. My work at New Zealand Rugby, I had a few roles there actually. I worked within the Te Hurianga team, which was focused on the prevention of harm within both at community and sort of high performance level. So things like consent, healthy relationships, bystander skills, safe use of online content for our sort of young emerging athletes, as well as child safeguarding. I've focused a lot of my time in the child safeguarding space at New Zealand Rugby, though. The initiative there is Safe Club, Safe Kids, and yeah, helped support the messaging and resources, as well as delivering the sessions for community and organisations around Safe Club, Safe Kids. Also worked on the on-field coach education program that New Zealand Rugby deliver on behalf of World Rugby, and helped deliver the mental wellbeing program, which was Head First, which is now called Mindset and Engage. So a few varied roles there. I worked with Challenge 2000 though in the youth space. Challenge 2000 held the contract to deliver Mates and Dates, which is a healthy relationship sort of consent program that runs through secondary schools for year 9 to year 13 students. It's based on sort of 5 sessions per sort of class or group. So I delivered that within secondary schools in Wellington as well. So that's enough about me though. As you can tell, I like to talk. I'm not a funny facilitator, although I might try and be sometimes. It doesn't come that naturally. So I can't see any of you either, which is a bit new for me. So I'm just sort of delivering off the PowerPoint. So yeah, we're here to talk about how we create sort of safeguarding cultures within sport and recreation. Sort of before we start though, it's extremely important that we look after ourselves during and after this session. And we won't be delving into specific cases of harm during this webinar, but we will be talking about abuse and sort of how that comes about within sport and recreation, with the sort of rates of abuse being terribly high across Aotearoa. Most, if not all, people know someone who has experienced harm or has experienced harm themselves. So if you need to take a break, if you feel uneasy during the session, please turn your camera off, step away, take a break. But that equally goes for if you start to feel uneasy afterwards or continue to feel uneasy, please reach out for help. There's no pressure to continue with the webinar. So the most important thing is that you seek some help if you're starting to feel a bit uneasy or off about the topic that we're talking about today. If you do need support, there's a couple of great free services to access, so Safe to Talk and 1737. Like I said, they're free to access. You may also have things like EAP, which is the Employee Assistance Program, through your organisation. So yeah, please reach out for help if you need. All right, so today we'll sort of talk about what safeguarding is. We'll create a bit of a baseline. We'll talk about the types of harm that we're safeguarding against, how harm happens within sport and rec, and then also how to prevent it. So I thought we'll start with a sort of baseline intro into what safeguarding is, and also to what safeguarding isn't. So at its core, it's the prevention of harm or abuse. Says the first sort of point at the top there points out, and I've underlined every one, which sort of talks to some of the other points as well around. Safeguarding is often referred to as a child safeguarding, and the term can be misleading. Of course, it is to safeguard children, but it's also the premise of safeguarding is to safeguard everyone. There is particular attention, though, drawn to sort of the vulnerable groups. Children, young people, those with disabilities, minority groups, or those that have less of a voice or power within an environment are deemed as sort of the vulnerable groups that we need to pay a bit more attention to. Typically, though, when we talk about safeguarding in sport and recreation, it often is referred to child safeguarding and or protection, which we'll talk about those two terms shortly. But to make it the protection of everyone, the participant sort of member protection topics or areas and organisational culture also feed, and they play a big part within safeguarding. The term safeguarding, though, isn't something you'll often hear outside of what is sport and rec, particularly in Aotearoa in New Zealand. It is, however, used safeguarding as a term across other parts of the world through a whole lot of different sectors. It's just not widely used here in Aotearoa. The key thing about safeguarding is that it should end up evoking sort of trust and confidence within your communities around the processes and the environments and experiences that are set up. It shouldn't evoke tension or discomfort from the community. Tension and discomfort will just sort of drive those unsafe behaviours out underground. So what are we safeguarding against? So harm and abuse, as I referenced at the start, the top four there on the left-hand side, so physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect, are often referenced for in terms of children, but they do cross over into the adult space as well. Often the terms they're different within the law. An example of that is sexual abuse, where within the sort of law within New Zealand, it's more called sexual violation, which is sort of the umbrella term for rape or unlawful sexual connection. It's also important to plant a seed at this time that, along with the rest of the session, is that these aren't to be viewed just as sort of coach or deliverer. Often when we talk about safeguarding, the deliverer of an activity or the coach is usually the one that's under the spotlight. It's wider than that, or athlete. It's also sort of athlete or participant on athlete participant, child on child, adult on adult, which is why the starter reference that it's about protecting everyone. It also includes racism and discrimination, sort of bullying, intimidation, harassment. I have lumped those sort of five together, but they all do have their own separate terminology and ways that they manifest out into sort of sport and recreation. On the right-hand side there, these are sort of the laws that in New Zealand that protect us against those types of harm or abuse. They're not all, though. There are some others. Oh, did someone have a question? No. All right. So examples in sport and rec. So these are some fairly high-level examples. There's a real spectrum, though, of how these types of harm or abuse happen, and the severities of that type of harm. But these are just some examples. So physical abuse, apart from the obvious of hitting, biting, slapping, etc., being forced to train or play or take part in physical activity when someone's ill, seriously ill or seriously injured, that will stop them from being able to perform the activity. So being forced to do that would be deemed as physical abuse. Emotional is that persistent threatening and belittling of behaviours or rejection, not only of the person but also of their ideas. Sexual abuse, I won't go into examples of those, but it's using the premise, how it can manifest within sport and rec is using the premise of extra specialised coaching or support to create alone time to then harm or abuse. And then neglect is just not providing that medical care when required. An example of that might be concussion. If someone's been visibly concussed or taken a head knock, and then them not receiving the medical care that they require, and then asking them to play on, knowing that they've had concussion or head knock. Racism and discrimination, excluding or degrading someone due to their race, ethnic identity, religion, gender, age, or sexual orientation, and there are others. And then bullying, intimidation, and harassment is when someone targets an individual group with the intention to gain control over them by means of aggressive, intimidating behaviour or exclusion. Before I move on, is there any questions? So I thought today we'll focus a little bit more on child safeguarding. It's an area that a lot of organisations, communities are working on actively, but it's also a really great template. So the premise and sort of principles behind child safeguarding are also good for the adult space as well. They provide a really good template. Probably to note before we move on that the Children's Act in Aotearoa states that a child is deemed as anyone 17 years and younger. So anyone working in that sort of pre-elite or early specialisation area needs to bear that in mind. So description of what child safeguarding is it's the well-being. Why is it? Is the well-being and ability for children and young people to thrive and play, active recreation, sport. Also requires their safety and welfare to be covered. Children and young people have the right to be free from harm and abuse. That is actively sort of called out within the Human Rights Act within New Zealand, Aotearoa, but also to the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Children. And so that's sort of the why behind it. The what is it? So child safeguarding or safeguarding is a set of actions to keep someone safe from harm. It's a broad term encompassing the prevention of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse and neglect of children, and the others that I mentioned earlier. Another term that we often hear, or you'll hear, that can be associated with safeguarding is child protection. But so even if really good preventative measures are put in place, concerns about child's well-being may still arise. But child safeguarding is different than child protection. Is different than child safeguarding. They're not interchangeable terms. So child protection is an essential part of safeguarding, though, and it refers to the action taken in response to a specific concern for a child or children who may be suffering or at risk of suffering harm or abuse. Really important that it does require sort of specialised child protection trained specialists within the area, particularly when we're talking about investigations. It's also to note that I mentioned earlier that they're not interchangeable terms, child safeguarding and child protection. A big reason for that is that the term child protection does have some sort of negative connotations, both here in Aotearoa, but also abroad. It's historically been used as a term to sort of uplift kids from homes through social services, particularly tangata whenua here in Aotearoa. So it can create unease and anger when used, particularly, so we've got to be careful how we use it, particularly when it's used in the wrong context. So being careful to use child safeguarding or safeguarding and protection the right way. Right, before I move on, is there any questions? It's a bit unnerving not being able to see anyone. Right, so building a safeguarding culture. So we've talked about the types of harm that we're protecting from, or abuse that we're protecting from. So first thing, there's sort of two parts to this. One is the risk factors. We need to be able to identify the risk factors, and then also what are the protective factors that we need to put in place. Those two together will build a safeguarding culture. So based on really good research from around the world, there's some common themes that are sort of relevant to everyone, both in sport and rec, no matter the type of activity. So how harm happens within physical activity environments, actually not only physical activity environments, some of the research that's created this has come from lots of different sectors as well. But these are the sort of the five sort of theme parts that are strewn through the research. So it's poor culture within sport and rec, so that winning or delivering sport or activity at all sort of costs, particularly at the cost of the participant. It's when poor behaviour is accepted, particularly at the cost of winning, and when below the line behaviour is accepted, things like violence and sort of sexual harassment. And this is not just at a grassroots level or a participant level. It's also folds into sort of leadership roles as well. So if a leader within an organisation is behaving really poorly, is sort of aggressive, harassing, then that sort of bleeds right through the organisation, right down to the delivery side as well. So it's really important that culture, which is a bit of a catchphrase, culture, is sort of is positive throughout. Inadequate processes. So when there's either none or not the right sort of policies and procedures in place to inform really good decision making and processes, particularly when issues arise. So that includes the investigation process and responsibilities around resolving issues that arise. Power imbalance. So valuing some people over others. This sort of manifests in that coach, unfortunately, I'm going to use that one sort of function again around a coach that has really poor, aggressive, harassing, bullying behavior, but they're getting results on the field. When there's those power imbalances are created through the accepting that behavior, it will create harm. It'll allow harm to occur. A lack of awareness. So that lack of awareness. Moved on too quickly. That lack of awareness throughout an environment. So when people at all levels or all functions don't know what harm is, what it looks like, and what they can do about it, that will allow harm to happen. And then not identifying where the opportunities for harm to happen are within your environment. So not being able to clearly identify the risk factors will allow harm to happen. So the flip side of that is prevention. So positive culture. So it's about creating behaviours and values that produce safer, fairer, and more inclusive environments and experiences. Positive culture are those sort of the beliefs and values that we will hold. So being able to really articulate those and use good principle-based operating sort of models that are already in place as well. So identifying what we're already doing to create really good culture that will also feed into making sort of safer environments and experiences. It may already, like I said, it may already be happening. So the balance is better philosophies, things like ensuring that diversity, equity, and inclusion are included within the overall sort of a strategic approach to your organisation and how you operate are really key to building really good positive culture. Policies and procedures. So all of the appropriate policies and procedures are in place for your organisation and the activity that you have They may be really different based on how you're delivering and the membership and the people that you're delivering them to, but it's about ensuring that you have all the right policies and procedures in place that will drive really good decision making, particularly when harm or poor behaviours are identified. Participant-centred, so prioritising the safety and well-being and needs of individuals. I've got whānau, which is sort of a broader term for everyone within that sort of family unit, children and adults is in the community. So it's the decision making around their needs and well-being are the centre of everything that we do. And awareness, understanding and learning, pretty big box there, full of lots of ideas, but it's around ensuring that everyone within your system, every role, every function, knows the sort of why, what, and how of safeguarding. It's about building skill. So it's good that journey of awareness, understanding, and learning. We know awareness alone is good, but it can also create a little bit of anxiety if people are just aware of the harm that can happen. When we empower them with a little bit more understanding and also some skill to be able to prevent and then respond, no matter their function, to when harm happens, we know that will instill sort of trust and confidence in an activity, in an organisation as well. But bearing in mind that the responsibilities need to be relevant to the type of role, function, and capability and capacity that individual has, or that group of individuals have. And then the last one is evidence and research. So evidence and research is used to provide practical guidance, and that also includes those lived experiences as well, because what we know is that those lived experiences are really important. At an organisational level, we can identify some guidance that we may need to give, but is it really relevant to those people that are out there delivering the activity? So those lived experiences that those people bring are really important to sort of create some really good sort of best guidance for the activity. And not to overload, but these are also some really key enablers. So within those sort of 5 areas, these based on some really great research to help organisations and people like yourselves. There's sort of following areas have been identified to help the development of safeguarding sort of protective factors. The top of them is that cultural sensitivity. So this is just about understanding the needs of the people that you serve and the activity you deliver, and also the environments that you're delivering them in. That'll build some really trust in sort of the processes that you're putting in place, because they'll be relevant to the people that are on the ground. That has sort of holistic approach around safeguarding not being bolted on, that it is in sort of everything that you do. It's around the culture that you're building. It doesn't necessarily have to be called out as safeguarding, but if there's a really good, positive, participant-centered culture, then that's going to be integrated. So safeguarding is then just going to be automatically integrated through. Incentives. See, it's not just the sort of financial benefits, which can be some support that you're going to give for your communities, and also the growth of membership through, if you're providing really good, safe, participant-centered experiences, then should grow your membership, which is sort of a financial benefit, incentive, but also too, there's some really good physical and emotional benefits to providing really safe, inclusive environments. And so this can create that a why statement for yourselves and your communities. Leadership. So really important that safeguards are led and championed by those working in key leadership roles. That's not just at like a national and a regional level, but also local. There'll be some really key champions within communities, local communities that can help drive really good culture and help to put in place really good safeguarding protective measures. Being dynamic, this is that sort of continuous assessment and growth of safeguarding within as an organisation and the processes that you're putting in place. So being able to sort of monitor the effectiveness of what you're doing, by communicating with the community, asking how it's going, and then that can be quantitative or qualitative sort of data that you gain from that. Engaging or resources. So yeah, these are really key. These can also be an incentive, and they'll also build trust, because what you're building along with that is trust that there's a commitment from your organisation to put time into, human time and financial resources into providing safe environments and experiences. The engaging stakeholders is a really key one. The only way to know whether you're truly participant-centered is by asking your participants. And participants, I mean everyone. So that's anyone that's sort of delivering or working within your space, volunteering as a participant, as a player within your space. It's asking their voices, and a key part of that will just create trust. Trust in the process that you're trying to create, in the environments that you're trying to create as well. Networks. So yeah, this will create a lot more support, sharing of resources and costs. So working together as a sort of community of practice around how safeguarding can work. It's not only just within your own sport or physical activity, but also too wider than that. Sort of other organisations of similar size that have a similar sort of demographic as well, understanding how they're doing it. I will share some links to the research that sort of backs that up. So sort of bombarded you with a lot of information, a lot of frameworks, and a lot of this is what you should do. But how do you put it into practice? So the first step, so my advice around this is the first step is that awareness and understanding, not just for your community, but also too for yourselves. And when I talk about community, actually, it's probably a key sort of term. I'm talking about everyone. That's not just sort of the people that are down on the ground participating in your activity, but your community is sort of that wider community that you work within. That's employees, any partners that you work with as well, to help deliver your sport or activity. So that first step is gaining a really clear understanding of safeguarding principles, particularly within the context of your physical activity, the environments that you utilise, and then the people that within your membership. That's part of that cultural sensitivity, as well as others. Raising awareness on safeguarding and promoting the concept around preventing harms, like that collective effort. So it's involving collaboration between experts, organisations, communities, and individuals, and will lead to equitable and more positive outcomes for all. It is a combined effort. It truly is. We know that when only one group functional role is actively trying to prevent harm or put in place safeguards, it's a lot of work, and it will often fall over. Engage organisations and communities to understand their needs. So as well as raising awareness, engaging with your communities and any partners that you have to understand those key risks and challenges and opportunities that exist within their environments and within their sort of roles or functions that they play. And then leading positive culture. There may be stuff that you're already doing, which is great, but also too that role modelling of those behaviours and values that foster safer, fairer, and more inclusive experiences and environments. So these are some of the first steps that is my advice to take. And I'll provide some research to sort of help provide a steer for these. Noting that some of you are already on a journey and may have completed, gone through that process of awareness and understanding. These are some great next steps, which is around developing that capability. So developing systems to support, the required safeguarding needs of your organisation and your communities. Really important to ensure that you're building that capability not only in-house, but also for those that are down on the ground delivering. Role modelling, again, that positive sort of culture change through public and strategic commitments to safer, fairer, and more inclusive experience. experiences and environments. Building a comprehensive suite of safeguarding resources. So things like policies, best practice guidance to put in place to sort of meet the needs of your physical activity environments and people. Training. So this is sort of the education piece and developing capability. For all, I've used the word stakeholder group, which stakeholder talking about people is not really nice, but it's talking about all the sort of different roles and functions that you have within your sport or physical activity. So it's providing some training for them to prevent and also respond to harm at all sort of levels of the functions that they play. Developing a network, as I said prior, so developing that network internally within your sort of activity, but also externally. So identifying some key organisations or groups that you can connect with and share your knowledge and collaborate in safeguarding practices, both, all at a national, sort of regional, local level. And then creating and encouraging sort of open communication channels for organisations, communities and individuals to raise concerns and to provide feedback and suggestions related to the safety, well-being and needs of them, of their people. So really important piece there around creating trust within your organisation. So this isn't also just about when there's issues arise, but it's also too just about people being able to communicate directly with the people that are able to make decisions around changing different things within the environment or activity that you're taking place. So that's, could be the local people on the ground or participants with the clubs, then also the clubs with sort of the regional organisations, and then regional with the national. So it's providing sort of that open communication channel between all those levels to ensure that everyone's voices and concerns are listened to. So support and resources that are already available. So I'll send these links out. But in terms of resources, so there's already a suite of child safeguarding and member protection policies and procedures online. The templates were provided to us in partnership with a very good organisation called Safeguarding Children. They're all available just to sort of add your pieces in, your individual organisation names or groups. What I would say about those policies and procedures, though, are that gaining a really good understanding of what safeguarding needs to look like within your environment will actually then point to whether these policies and procedures are fully relevant. So you may need to make them more bespoke for your particular environment. So a policy isn't something that you write your name in and then put in the back office to protect yourself as an organisation. We need to understand how you can bring those policies and those procedures to life for your communities. There's some good education and training online as well. There's some bite-sized learning, which is sort of that beginning end, all the way to Sport Tutor at Sport NZ, where there's a child protection course that you can do. It's free to access through your organisation. That is around identifying types of harm. Really good response processes as well are added in that training. There is currently a sport and recreation complaint and mediation service available for the sector. So if you have anyone has any issues within or concerns within the sport or rec, they can access this complaints and mediation service. So there's a link there which I'll send out. And also too, so resources, another key one at Sport NZ is the 3 approaches. So this is about engaging with the community, understanding their needs, using really good sort of insights and data to sort of drive the direction for safeguarding, as well as other sort of parts of delivering sport and rec. Some research to sort of start that journey of understanding and or awareness and understanding. Those 8 pillars or those 8 areas, enablers of safeguarding. I've got a link there to the research behind that. There's some really good stuff that's come out of Australia as well as here in Aotearoa. But one is sort of 7 lessons. So there was a Royal Commission into child abuse within Australia, which covered sport and recreation. And Play by the Rules is a website in Australia that has sort of broken down really 7 lessons from that Royal Commission, which is a great read. And then there are, like I spoke about, safeguarding is an international sort of term within sport, and there's some international safeguards that have been created for children in sport. That is a great resource to sort of to look at. Before I continue, are there any questions?
Hi Cam, I'm Megan from Gen Z or Gymnastics New Zealand. I just asked, just asking around, we do safeguarding lead training. It's a requirement now. We've just made it compliant for all our clubs to have it as part of affiliation. But we're finding that the Safeguarding New Zealand training is only available during work hours, which of course our sport functions a lot out of work hours. Do you have anyone else that you recommend or know of anyone? We're just doing a bit of research at the moment, but came up in my meeting just before.
Oh, sorry. So you're running safeguarding lead training.
So all our clubs require to go through the training. So we've been using the Safeguarding New Zealand version. But if there's any other companies that run it, it would just be helpful to know.
Oh, so you've been using Safeguarding Children?
Yes, correct.
Okay. There are. There's holistic safeguarding. We have a partnership with Safeguarding Children.
Yeah.
There are some others available that can deliver it.
Okay.
And is that run for the safeguarding leads? Is this run in person or is it online?
Webinar. Yeah, online.
Oh, webinar online. Okay. I'll come back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Appreciate it.
No problem.
If it helps, I'd just like to, I guess, echo what you're saying. Is we've been on this journey for a while now, 2.5 years in, and when you have a culture of clubs backing you, then a lot of things come up that are really minor, but it's also about supporting the kids and being there for everyone. So the more people on board, the better across the sector. So appreciate your presentation too.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Yeah, and look, it's a good time to acknowledge the work that gymnastics has been doing to build a really robust sort of safeguarding approach for your community. It's amazing. There's a couple like yourselves. Scouts is another one, and I don't want to leave anyone out. Doing some great work. At sort of all levels, there's some great work doing, and I know gymnastics are doing some amazing work. So well done.
Thank you.
Right, as I said, I can't see anyone, so it's a little bit, like I said, a bit unnerving. But if there's no other questions, I'll sort of move on. Brilliant. What I'll move on to next is, and I mentioned earlier around the fact I sort of straddle between the Integrity Transition Program and also Sport NZ. The Integrity Transition Program was responsible for creating, as well as the Establishment Board, the new code, the new legislation. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's coming, what has already been and what's already coming, just sort of raise a little bit more awareness because this will provide a little bit more support for organisations as well. The future of integrity in sport and recreation. So why has this work happened? Why is there legislation? Why is there going to be a code and a commission? So there's been lots of reviews done in the Integrity Working Group review that was done of the sort of wider system, recommended establishing an organisation independent from Sport NZ and high performance sport, which also folds into sort of drug-free sport, as well as they recommended the creation of a code of integrity for sport and recreation. Participants have been saying for a long time that there's problems within the sector, and so that this is the time for us to be doing something about it. So the pillars of the commission. So anti-doping organisation, so Drug-Free Sport NZ, which is already an existing organisation, will be folded into the commission. Competition manipulation will be something else that the commission looks after, as well as participant protection, which is child safeguarding as well as sort of wider participant. So participant within the sort of legislation really just encompasses everyone. So again, we don't want that term sort of misconstrued as people that are taking part in sport. It's everyone. It's coaches, spectators, coaches, administrators. It's the term sort of defined within the legislation as well. It's quite broad. So the changes that are coming or have been, so yeah, the Integrity Sport and Recreation Act was passed in August this year, with very little argument from opposition parties at that time. All agreed, obviously lots of questions though, to ensure that it's right for everyone. But that passed in August. So the Act establishes the Integrity Sport and Recreation Commission. So within the Act, it deems that the Commission needs to be established. It also states that the Commission will need to be operational by July 1st next year. And the team that is headed by the wonderful Rebecca Rolls that I work within, so the Integrity Transition Program team is supporting that work, along with the Establishment Board, who are signing off all the work. The Commission's purpose. So yeah, it sounds simple, but there is a lot to do. The Commission's primary approach is participant-centric. So the meaning ultimately the Commission's main focus is on the impact of integrity on the participants and improving the outcomes for them. To achieve those, though, the Commission will have a large role to support organisations to achieve improved integrity outcomes for everyone. So how will the Commission achieve this purpose? It's got multiple layers, but the Commission will set a minimum standard for organisations and individuals. This is what the code will be. The Commission will also provide education and training and guidance within all those areas, so doping, match fixing and participant protection, including child safeguarding. It'll establish a clear complaints channel. I mentioned the Sport and Rec Complaints and Mediation Service. So that'll be a service that'll be folded in or new one established to ensure that there's a really good channel, as well as ensuring that the resolution service is really robust. It will conduct investigations into integrity matters, including look into breaches of the code and systematic threats to integrity. It will establish a disciplinary panel and sanctions. So the Commission will work alongside sector organisations. So it's about raising understanding across a range of integrity areas. Through that, like I mentioned before, through the provision of education, training and resources, through the code to provide that really clear set of minimum standards, and then a clear way to achieve those and maintain them. And then supporting the areas that we know organisations find tough, things like those complaint processes, investigations, that soak up a lot of precious time, resource, and they're quite specialist areas. So the Commission needs to work alongside organisations to understand the needs. But there will be times, when a matter is so serious that the Commission will simply need to step in to ensure the best outcome can be achieved. This would be in serious cases of threats to integrity. So what is a threat to integrity? As deemed within the legislation, so competition manipulation, use of prohibited substances or doping methods, bullying, violence, abuse, sexual misconduct, intimidation, harassment, racism and other discrimination, corruption, fraud and deception, And then a failure by an organisation to take reasonable measures to prevent these behaviours and safeguard children. The Commission, though, through its education and training and the code, will be seeking to prevent these threats of integrity. So not only acting when they happen, but also actively working to support organisations and the wider community to prevent them from happening in the first place. So the code, what will the code of integrity say? So it's still very much in draft phase. There's a lot of consultation happening within the sector. There's engagement with Māori, Pacifica, lots of reference groups as well, high performance athletes. There's a wider community engagement happening at the moment. So there's really good consultation happening with the wider sort of sport and rec community to understand what the code should say, so what those minimum standards should be. But what it is the cornerstone of the sector's integrity system. Organisations will be able to formally adopt the code, which will then apply to all your affiliates. So if you sign up, if you're a national organisation and you sign up to the code, then those minimum standards will also, you'll right down to community level, will need to have to uphold those as well. Signing up to the code will place obligations on organisations, but not signing up won't mean that you're exempt from the Commission's oversight as well in terms of threats to integrity. The code has been designed in consultation with the sector and key interest groups, like I spoke about before, and it's intended to promote participants' rights and uphold Te Tiriti o Waitangi and reflect Te Ao Māori principles. It's the independence of the Commission. So like I mentioned before, so the Commission is going to be independent from Sport NZ and high performance sport. We've heard through consultation that this needs to happen to ensure people trust and have confidence within the Commission and how they're acting within the system. It's established to be by separate legislation. Isn't going to be an independent Crown entity, as drug-free sport is now, like others in New Zealand, and it will be funded with its own allocation of money. The Integrity Transition Program team are always keen to hear anyone's views. So if you're not currently in one of those reference groups and you want to know more, or you want to provide your feedback or insights, there's a link here and an email. My advice would be go onto the website though for the Integrity Transition Program and to learn a little bit more and then formulate any questions or feedback or insights that you might be able to provide. And lastly, any questions? Any further questions before I sort of stop sharing?